This is the Reluctant Leader podcast, created because, through no fault of your own, you've become one. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and I know how it feels when you're getting ground down by people issues, constantly firefighting and wondering how on earth you ended up here. In each episode, I invite a guest to discuss a topic and give you 3, sometimes more, top tips that will help you in your leadership role. They are experts in the field, and you'll find out why they do what they do and what took them down that path. For more resources to help you on your leadership journey, check out thereluctantleader.academy, where you'll find details of how to join the Reluctant Leader Success Path. So let's see who's in the hot seat this week. Today I'm talking to Eoin McQuone. Eoin's 30-year career path has taken him from engineering through marketing to company director, with a depth of experience in business strategy, leadership and corporate social responsibility. He's an optimist and passionately believes that business has a positive role to play in promoting prosperity for all while protecting the planet. He helps businesses to approach sustainability as an opportunity to drive growth, fuel innovation and ignite passion. Hope you enjoy this chat we had about sustainability, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Eoin, welcome to the Reluctant Leader podcast.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here.
Yes, I'm looking forward to talking about this. It's one of those subjects that it's in the news all the time, isn't it? And it's one of those things, I suppose, we get thrown information at, and we need to try and get a bit of clarity. And so I hope, I'm sure we will, after this half an hour or so we're chatting about it, we'll get more clarity about what sustainability means in respect to how a business can embrace what sustainability is. And put those things into place so that, you know, we have a more sustainable business and the benefits that go with that. But before we get into that, the one question that I always ask all my guests is, why do you do what you do? And what was that pivotal moment that took you down this path?
Okay, so before I started my own business, I was a director at Kohler Myra, leading manufacturer of showers. And I was running the commercial business there, selling products into schools, hospitals, that kind of thing. And the big moment for me was soon after I got that role, I went with one of my sales team to one of the big building contractors' offices up in Manchester. And when you arrive on these sites, they always ask you to sign in, the name of the company and so on. But a new thing there for me was that they asked me to write down the number of miles that I'd driven to get there. And this was curious to me because I'd not been asked that before. So I asked the receptionist there what that's all about. And she said, well, we've got some targets on our carbon emissions, our carbon footprint, and we include all our visitors to our sites in that footprint. I thought, well, that's interesting. So being a curious soul, when we got into the meeting with the engineer, I asked him what that was all about. He said, yeah, we've got these corporate targets, and we're all supposed to try and reduce the emissions of the business. But to be honest, it's hard to know what to do about it. And you know, my background to that point was marketing. So my marketing brain starts to fire up here, you see. And I said, well, that's interesting. So I said, if we produce some products that helped you build more environmentally friendly buildings, would that make you more likely to buy our products? And he said, absolutely. So that got me along a train of thought that realized that actually we're moving into an era where sustainability and environmental issues are actually going to be increasingly important commercially, simply because clients want them. And when you actually started to look at that whole market of commercial buildings, we realized that something like 60% of commercial buildings have got an environmental specification, and that's only growing. And that really was a light bulb moment for me to say, actually, what we should do is to put sustainability at the heart of our business strategy and build our products and services and our way of going to market around this emerging market, this emerging trend of green buildings. But what that really surprised me about is once I'd done that, it started to generate innovative ideas around new products, new services, ways we can do business, but it also got the whole of the team energized around it too, because increasingly environmental issues really matter to people. And so it had a real beneficial impact throughout the team in terms of motivation, engagement, as well as driving a whole load of innovation and a great competitive strategy. So that got me really down a whole track of starting to investigate and understand what the environmental issues were and how they might relate to business, and how business and the environment can stop being enemies that fight each other and actually, if you like, work together to create a more sustainable future that also helps to drive business growth.
Mm. That's really interesting, actually, because that's a good story, and that, you know, it's something that sparked your interest there just by asking you how far you've driven. And I think you know, we are creatures of habit, and we do things in a way because we've always done that way. And it might be just that we jump in a car to go somewhere, where there might be other ways to get there. There might be, you know, a bus that's just down the end of the road that would get there just as quick, or, you know, take a train on a longer journey, all those things. But if we haven't got, you know, sometimes we need someone just to sort of jog our conscience and say, you know, there is other ways you can do this. And so that's a really interesting story, actually. So, okay, so we're talking about the sustainability here with businesses, and obviously there's a lot of information out there. So, putting myself in the position of someone in a leadership position in a business, where would you suggest someone like that really hasn't really adjusted it yet? Where do you think they should start?
Okay, well, it's like any business problem or any problem. Before you make a start on doing something about it, you really need to understand what your current position is. So if you're going to build a sales strategy, you'd start off by understanding what are our current sales, you know, what's our current profit margin, and so on, and actually getting the facts on the table. So sustainability is no different to that. And so it's really important to try to find a way of measuring your current performance so that you know when you make changes, have you improved and how much have you improved? And one of the best ways to do that right now, and a really good starting point, is carbon footprint. And the reason is because if you do a carbon footprint properly, it touches all aspects of your business, will help you understand not just where you're generating emissions from burning fuel, but also where you're creating waste, in the thing, you know, where you're creating waste in all the things that you do. And that can really help you target your activities and give you a benchmark to move forward. So, you know, actually, are you making the improvements you think you're making?
Yeah. And for someone that obviously doesn't know, all I know is what's thrown at me in the news, really. There's two sort of elements here. We think about obviously recycling stuff, so not wasting stuff, so not sending stuff to landfill. And then there's also the element of saving resources and not using them in the first place, isn't there? Is there anything else that, you know, are those the core two elements, or is there something else I've missed?
I think there's a few elements to environmental sustainability. So one is climate change, and the climate emergency is a big issue that we have to get to grips with, and that's to do with the gaseous emissions that we're creating that are driving global warming, and almost a lot of the activities that we do, such as heating our houses, driving around, making products, throwing them away, all create emissions that help drive global warming. So that's one of the big issues. Waste is another of the big issues, as you say. You know, the amount of waste that ends up in landfill at the moment, or worse, in parts of the environment where it really shouldn't be, like the ocean, is shocking. And actually, we've got to remember that the resources on the planet ultimately are finite, and yet our population is growing like crazy. So if we keep on just taking resources in the planet and chucking them away, we're actually going to, you know, at some point we will start to run out of resources, and they'll get much more scarce. So, but the two are not unrelated. I saw a recent document from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which showed that 55% of our global warming or emissions come from energy creation, which isn't a surprise. But the other 45 emissions come from products manufacture and use and disposal. So the two issues of reducing emissions from energy and reducing emissions by cutting down waste are directly related, and they're really the two big issues I think that we've got to get to grips with.
Yes, and I guess you've sort of alluded to it already, and it's, if you're going to introduce this into a business environment, the place to start is presumably is in your values. It's how you trade as a business, and have some sort of reference to sustainability in those values, so you can then trickle them down throughout the organisation. That seems to be the obvious place to start. Is that what you suggest?
I think so, because we've seen increasingly the issue of greenwashing, and people are not daft, and they recognise very often when businesses are don't really mean it, and they're just doing something for a little bit of publicity.
I was just sort of wondering what greenwashing means. Basically, that's when companies aren't really they're just using it as a PR stunt or a gimmick. Is that right?
Exactly. And right, I think it's usually pretty easy to spot. So you're absolutely right. You have to get your values right in the first place and ask yourself, do you actually mean it? And are you going to get behind it? And ask all of your employees to get behind it as a core value of the organization. Because your employees will spot it too. And if you don't embrace it as a core value, then what happens is what you do doesn't align with what you say. Because you can say we're going to get more sustainable, but if you don't hold it as a real value, then what you do is actually all the decisions you make will drive it in a different direction. People spot that very quickly. So you're absolutely right. It's got to start with the values and with an honest appraisal. Do you actually mean it, and what does it mean to your business?
Yeah, and there's lots of obviously implications once you go down this route, there will be costs. That's the thing with any business. The first thing that most people will focus on is, what's the cost of this? And I know we've talked about the cost of the planet and all that stuff, but when you're running a business, that isn't your immediate concern. What your immediate concern is what's it going to cost? What's the impact on my bottom line if I start to do this? Because as we know, most things need an investment up front. So it costs up front, but actually from that initial investment, then you get the payoff in future years. And I guess that's something that you have to sort of address at an early stage. No,
absolutely. So there are costs and there are investments involved. At the same time, there are great benefits to be had too. So, there can be costs in, say, investing in renewable energy or lower energy equipment or removing waste. But almost all of those projects, if you do them, if you look into a medium and long-term view, are ultimately going to likely to save money. So there might be some upfront investment, but there's money to be saved along the way. And if we want to create a business that's sustainable for the future, we'd hopefully be looking beyond just this year, and we're looking into 3 or 4, 5, 6 years. And that's when the benefits can start to come from a cost saving. But I think there's a much bigger benefit for a lot of businesses, putting aside the cost issue, which is that both consumers and business customers want to buy sustainably. And I think they're ahead of a lot of businesses. So, I've seen surveys recently with as many as 3/4 of customers and 3/4 and similar number of business buyers really puts sustainable values at the heart of their buying decision. And so if you can respond to that and demonstrate genuinely that you're trying to operate more sustainably and trying to offer more sustainable products and services, then I think it's a great opportunity to grow your business, which is what all business owners, all business leaders are trying to do ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And you alluded to there, really, it's actually starting with what your clients want or your customers, isn't it? And finding out what they really value and obviously deliver something around those values. It would be a good place to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm really, one of the things I say a lot when I'm talking about this is stop thinking about sustainability as a cost and start thinking about it as a business opportunity, because it really is. As I say, consumers want to buy it. But as with any business opportunity, the best place to start is by understanding what your customers really want and really need. And so, start that conversation with them. Don't be afraid to start that conversation, even if you haven't done a great deal at the moment. Start that conversation in a low-key way, because you'll start to understand what matters to them. And then you can tailor your sustainability activities in a way that really matters to your customers. And that's going to be the key to making it truly sustainable for your business, because there's nothing better for a business than delivering to your customers what they're looking for.
And as you alluded to earlier as well, and when you talked about, when you had the experience with the how many miles have you driven, and you asked the question of why are you doing this, and then you carried on and thinking about, well, what the implications of this. Then actually the implications are, if you can actually think about your offer and that it is sustainable, then that opens up a new market to you, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. Yeah. And that to me is the key to actually making a more sustainable economy and a more sustainable way of moving forward. Is it has to work for business. Yeah. And so if you think about how can we move sustainability from the realms of doing good, what some organizations call corporate social responsibility, how can we get that closer into the heart of the business and actually drive growth from it? Because that way we'll have a much bigger impact and we'll be much more committed to it, because we can see the business benefits that it's driving.
Yeah, and it becomes like a natural thing we do all the time. It's like,
absolutely,
and everything we do, how does this affect our sustainability? And is this good? It's how is this going to be viewed? It's like, having a policy about low carbon and all that stuff, and then your corporate, the CEOs flying around in a private jet. It just doesn't. It's not. It's going to shout. Well, you obviously don't believe in what you're saying. You're just doing it just because you think you're going to make more money. It's not really something you believe in.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the same time, we shouldn't be afraid of making money from it when we're doing it the right way and for the right reasons. But that's what I was talking about with greenwashing earlier. If you say one thing and do another, people will spot it very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point, isn't it? It's getting to a point where people understand it's an opportunity. It's not. Yeah. Yes, there's going to be there might be some investment up front, which with anything that's good, whether it's new equipment or those things that you have to invest in, but ultimately you're going to get a payback, and that's what most businesses are going to look at, aren't they?
Yeah, and we shouldn't also forget the payback that we get personally as business owners, in knowing that actually we're helping to create a future that's more sustainable for the next generation too.
Absolutely, yeah.
Business owners that I speak to, that's actually a really important motivator too.
Yeah, and they've got family and what have you come along, and they think, well, I want to do my best to show the way, and it's about introducing new habits that hopefully people will carry on, and that's the thing, isn't it? So I wondered at this stage you could share maybe some stories of the sort of work you've done with your clients and how you've helped them to sort of embrace this sustainability.
Sure. Well, I've been doing some work with family-run business in Tewkesbury called the Name Label Company. Recently, they make personalised name labels for clothing and the like. But they're really Matt and Emma. They are really committed to making their business more sustainable, and they asked me to help them as a starting point to calculate their carbon footprint, because they recognise the benefits of doing that. As I say, that getting that stake in the ground and then knowing where to go, and it was quite an eye opener, I think, for them when I talked them through the process to realise there's something like 18 different categories of emissions creation that we potentially look at. Not every business will be creating emissions in all those 18 categories. it's a little bit more complex than we thought, but
Yeah.
than they realised. But the advantage of what they did say is, I'm so glad that it's as thorough as this, because we don't want to be just paying lip service here. We really want to make a difference. And by delving into every aspect of the business, this is going to help us to do it. So I thought that was a wonderful way of looking at it.
Yeah. And I guess you then help them start implementing how they can start reducing whatever that figure was once you've got to that figure.
That'll be the next stage.
Yeah.
We've just finished the actual first stage, the calculation piece. The next stage is then to decide actually where do we go next with that.
Yeah, and obviously it's important to be able to measure up front, isn't it? To see where your starting point is. Again, you mentioned it earlier. If you know where you are now, what's the reality now, then whatever you put in place and then you remeasure, then you can see the difference you've made, and then that makes you feel as if you've made some progress, doesn't it?
Exactly, it's massively motivating, and I honestly believe that there's a huge change in behaviour that happens when you measure something and put a number on it and publish that. It dramatically changes the the pace of change that you want to make, because all of a sudden you're seeing that number, and it can help you target a little bit more effectively. It's very easy to suddenly say, okay, we want to get more sustainable, and we can think of this, that, and the other, and you end up with a great big long list. And think, well, gosh, how am I going to do all of this? By being a little bit more judicious about it and making the measurements first, you can then more easily choose, okay, now I can see that these are the three things that are going to have the most impact. Let's do those first.
Yeah, so it's quick wins you're looking for, isn't it? In most, again, business mentality is that you want to see the biggest benefit as soon as possible. And if you can get there and find out where you can actually, focus your energy to get that outcome, then all the better.
I think it's about having a good mix. So you want to see some quick wins that get momentum, but you also probably want to have a mix of items that are going to take 2 or 3 years to come to fruition. But when they do come, I've had a much bigger impact. And as a business leader, I think it's important to have a good mix of the two.
Yeah, and are there typical things that for most businesses always come up that you can almost guarantee that they're going to be key things that they can do straight away?
So the big items are typically any business that has premises. You're looking at heating and electricity, big ticket items. So moving to renewable electricity supplies. A lot of it's now relatively easy to move your electricity supplier to one who's producing all renewable or a mix of renewable electricity, and that's and it can even switching can even save you money sometimes. So don't necessarily assume that that's going to be more expensive.
Yeah.
So that's a relatively easy thing to do. Another low-hanging fruit, if you've got premises and you haven't done it already, is LED lighting. Can reduce your electricity bill for the lighting substantially, and the payback periods are often only around about a year or less.
Yeah, and there's some quite good schemes around at the moment. I've noticed with those sort of things, people will put them in, and actually you don't have to actually find the money up front. There's all sorts of things going on that encourage you to make that investment without having to find the funds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's grants, but there's also commercial businesses who are offer that. They'll fit the energy saving equipment and actually pay for it out of the savings.
Yeah.
That are generated. So there's plenty of options around for relatively quick wins.
Yeah. So if you haven't got the money to invest, then there's actually options where you may not have to actually put your hand in your pocket up front. There might be ways to get around this. So I think that was worth sharing, because I think if your funds are a bit tight, then you think, well, I can't do it until I've got the money. Well, actually, let's break down some barriers and say, well, actually, it's not all about spending a lot of money up front. You can actually get investment in a different way by people having putting the equipment in like you just suggested, and then they get their payback from the savings. So it's been innovative, isn't it, around these things? It's actually been innovative about how you can introduce these new concepts or new technologies to get things moving and breaking down barriers in some situations, isn't it?
Yeah, no, most definitely. And, involving your employees is another great way of spotting ideas. When one of the great experiences I had, where is it, Myra, we ran a project called the Eco Pledge. And I got to say, I can't claim credit for this. This was a predecessor who started this, but I helped to continue. But the idea was that the business put aside a fund of £100,000 for projects that would both drive sustainability improvements, but also save costs. And we really thought that was going to be a challenge to spend and generate those savings. But actually, within the first year, we just opened it up to all the employees and said, just come up with ideas. And within the first year, over £300,000 worth of ideas were generated. And second year, it was close to £500,000. So, wow. And these were ideas that were sitting on the table that were in people's heads, but for some reason they hadn't felt able to articulate them. So it was amazing, really, the opportunities that were there.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it? And the payback there is enormous. It reminds me of that. What is it? Some of the I'm not sure whether I'm right in saying it's Google or one of the big companies. They give their employees 20% of their time is to spend on anything that they feel that they want to that might benefit the business and. It's a similar sort of scenario, isn't it? There's some funds, do what you do with it, and then see what happens. And it's amazing how creative people can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, many heads are better than one.
Yes. I'm spending a lot of time thinking about that because what we stifle creativity and innovation by bringing together too many people that are like-minded. What we really need to do is bring together people that are from diverse backgrounds, different age groups, all those things, and then give them the same problem and see what happens and interact those ideas and see what comes out. And it's amazing how that can have a massive effect on, what comes out and the ideas that can used is immense.
It is, yeah. And that's why I love running workshops with clients as well. And what I find is the best participants of those workshops are the ones who are skeptical at the start, who are voicing, are you really sure? Is this right? Are we going to be able to do that? Because once you can get them engaged, actually, they're often the ones who actually have some of the best ideas, but also help you test the ideas so that they become more robust. So that diversity of thought is really critical. Totally agree.
And that's a good point, actually, because we're all, you've got some people that are a bit gung ho and they'll do change for the change's sake because they embrace everything that comes along. But then you also need that mix of people that are actually going to question and say, well, just hang on a minute, let's just look at this a bit more carefully, check this. Whereas some people wouldn't bother checking. And it's very important to make sure that actually it's getting the result that we actually set out to do in the first place.
You absolutely need both.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a good balance. So, Ian, unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of time. These half an hour seem to fly by. So we're getting to the point where we want to think about some top tips for the listeners to take away after listening to this sustainability topic, which hopefully we can sort of distill some clarity as to how people can walk away and start thinking about how they can introduce this. So what would those top tips be from where you are?
Yeah, so I think we've already mentioned top three, really. First one for me is know your footprint. Know your carbon footprint, because understanding where you're starting from is really important, and then you can understand the improvements that you're making. Second one is, think of sustainability as a business opportunity. And so start by asking your customers, what does sustainability mean to them and what matters to them? And that will help give you ideas about where to take your business forward in a way that will help drive growth because you're responding to the needs of your customers. And the third one we've just been talking about there, involve all of your employees in the efforts, because that diversity of thought and opinion and experience will give you results that you never dreamed you could have, for sure.
Fabulous. Great sum up there. So Ian, thank you very much for your time today. It's been really interesting. I'm sure listeners got great value and maybe start to think in a different way about what sustainability means, and hopefully bring that into the working environment sooner rather than later.
Well, that'd be fabulous. And thanks for inviting me, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out thereluctantleader.academy. And if you get a chance, please leave a review on whichever platform you have been listening. And also share the love by sharing the episode with someone who would benefit. Leadership is a choice. If you have the right mindset, know the process to follow, and the key skills to use at each point in the process, you have everything you need to leave a lasting legacy. Don't forget to put into action anything that has struck a chord in this episode. And until next time, be the best you can be.